Okay, we're gonna do that cute little, what did we call it, Christy?
I keep calling it a swirly whirly, but a little stem stitch whirl. Wasn't that it?
Yeah, and this is nowhere else. I don't know. You know, a lot of times you can get really, 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 really good videos on embroidery online, but I've never seen this anywhere. And it actually was developed out of desperation because I wanted circles, but I didn't want to applique them. And so, anyway, when we start with a stitch, and in some cases you use just one strand, it depends on the size. Right now we're using 2 strands, and I stitched up to the center. So I want to take just a tiny stitch, and it's like just 3 threads. It's really, really tiny. But what we're doing is locking that center. Okay. Now remember, when you're stitching, you want to always have the circle. This actually goes
Counterclockwise or clockwise?
I think it's clockwise. Okay, so you want the circle clockwise. Now everyone's going to be a little bit different, so you want to play with it just a little bit. So don't make yourself crazy. So we're going to cross over that center line. And with the thread, you want to go ahead and pull it tight. And I'm moving the thread to the outside, right there. And I'm doing it really tiny, but you can do them big. You don't have to do it this tiny. There we are. So we're going clockwise around. And it's not going to show up in the beginning, but what we're doing is building up that center so it'll actually lift a little bit. So it's, okay, so now we're going to go over here, right there. All right, now as you can see, you can start seeing the stitch. Now this one goes right at that same little stitch that I just put 2 stitches back. So we're right there. And come over, and as you go out, you can lengthen it just a little bit as you go out, but in the beginning they need to be pretty tiny. And see how it's building it up in the center, and that makes it kind of loft there in the middle. And I really love this little look. Yeah, I'm going to do at some point some project that all there is these little circles and the padded stems, or the padded satin stitch. All right, can you see how it's building it up? And then I'm crossing over to that one right there. And let's put the needle up in, but I want to get on the other side of that stitch. So you want to just kind of stitch under there. So we want to make sure that it's pulled to the center. And moving over, we're holding on to that and catching it. And what's happening is that outside stitch is actually pushing, see this stitch right here, that one is pushing the thread to the center to stabilize it. All right, so we go out again, and I'm just going to catch it now with this one. You can pull up and catch. So you're either going to do it as a stab stitch, or you can do it as a, depending on the thickness. Can you see how it's like building up itself there? Isn't that the coolest thing? So if you have something that calls for a French knot, but you want it just a little bit more controlled, this is the option for you on that, because it kind of wraps around itself. Can you see how it's wrapping? It's very cool. So I was telling my son Neil that I just love handwork, and he kind of looks at me cross-eyed, and I said, well, you know, I have 3 industrial embroidery machines and I'm doing everything by hand. And he goes, yeah, what's wrong with you? And the truth is, you cannot do this kind of stuff on an industrial sewing machine. And it's good for the heart, makes you feel good.
Well, it's a good thing your daughter gets it then, right?
Gets what?
Gets that this is good for the heart.
Yeah. But you feel the same way about hand stuff.
Yep.
It's in the DNA, isn't it,
I
Christy?
think so.
But you're more like a machine piecer. Like, I'm not necessarily that. I'm an appliquer. But still, the handwork is just yummy on a quilt. There. Look how it's twisting. Isn't that the coolest thing you've ever seen? I know, we're so sick. It's just a little bit of thread. And just to kind of explain thread too, thread is a huge deal when you're working with it. Like if you're doing cotton or thread that's just really thread that's not been made very well, you're not going to get the same look. Just not. You know, compared to the silk, it's just different. Isn't this the coolest thing? Christy, say yes.
Yes. Yes.
There you go. Starting to look like a little rosette. And I promise it doesn't take nearly this long when you're doing it on your own. Because when I don't have to talk, I can really zip through these things.
So the one side gets longer.
Oh, I don't know. It's just
Right.
been,
I'm just looking.
I just did that. There's no rule.
I need a mount next time. Something to hold the phone. Hold my little camera.
Yeah, you should have brought the one that you have. Oops. Did you see what I did though?
Mm-mm.
I went to the inside instead of the
Oh.
outside.
But you just whip it under there to fix it.
Yeah, yeah. And, you know, some people are going to like it going the other way, you know, to the left or counterclockwise as opposed to clockwise. So, you know, it's really a personal preference. It's the same steps. It's just how you want it to look. Because if you go the other way, it actually is a little tighter of a look. It isn't so much of a rosette-y kind of look.
Mm-hmm.
So it really depends on what you want. So
And the look will change a bit if you use this compared to
it'll
overlay.
change. Thread just makes a huge difference. Huge difference. So, and you know what I would love to see at some point is this done with hand painted thread.
Hmm.
Can you see it variegating a little
Yeah.
bit as it goes in and out?
That would be.
And the reason I say hand painting, I haven't tried it yet, but I really want to just like hand paint some of the silk to create some shadowing. So that'll be one of the next experiments. See how I'm holding it? That pushes it down.
Mm-hmm.
Isn't that the coolest thing? Love it. Oops, I made it a little long again. I'm putting my fingernail there so it'll actually slide down to the bottom. Did that make sense?
Yep. I think it gets it going around rather than crossing over the top too, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I have this really, and some people will probably have the same problem, is that as I'm stitching, I'll spin the needle. And that's what creates a lot of the thread actually changing its texture, is how you spin the needle. So if you have a problem with that, I'm trying to train myself not to. You want to get that spin out that you're actually generating. And your thread will also wear out really, really quickly if your needle's too small. So you'll have a totally different look in your stitch if you're using a needle that isn't the right size. So if you notice that the thread doesn't come through the fabric correctly, you may have to go up a needle size. I don't know if anybody's ever told you that, but you know, it really depends. And I mean, I just say that it depends, but the reality is everyone, it's an art form. It's not a science. Embroidery is an art form. So depending on, you know, the brush strokes, say in a picture, if your stitches are different than my stitches, the end result is gonna be a little bit different. Not wrong or right. It's just how it works, because it is an art form. Ah, there we go. Can you see how that's working?
It's beautiful.
Okay, I can't see to
I know.
stitch. You're so funny. Isn't that pretty how it's turning like a rosette?
Yes.
And it acts very similar to like a log cabin when you're sewing a log cabin or a pineapple block.
Mm-hmm.
It's exactly the same thought process. As you start from the center, or even like paper piecing, you know, you start from the center, and you can take the same technique and put it in any shape, because as you get to the outside of, say it's a leaf, you start in a circle, and then that circle will be inside the leaf, and then you just skip a couple of stitches where it curves. So this just works really well for a lot of stuff. And Christy's new quilt that we're working on right now is going to have a lot of this kind of thought processes in it. And if you're more of a modern or a simpler kind of a embellisher, I mean, this would be so cool to have two threads, and you know, you do one row with that one thread, and then you do the next row, so you'd actually kind of get a stripey, kind of swirly thing going on. Almost done. So as you all know, some of my quilts have lots of circles in it. Oh my God, wouldn't this just be wonderful? Not in the real tiny ones, or in the real big ones. I would just use it in the tiny ones, so I could create that same look without having to fight with the applique. Looking good, Christy.
Mm-hmm.
Isn't this a beautiful color? I love this color. Every time I dye something new, I want to make a whole quilt out of it.
Need more hours in our days.
I already work way too many.
I know. More hours for the fun
Well,
things.
you can't. Well, cleaning up after myself is work, so I count that. Yeah, that's the hardest part, you know. And I'm one of those kind of quilters that I just throw things everywhere, and I have like 40 pair of scissors, you know, but it's always enjoyable. But embroidery, oh my God, I love embroidery. Applique is wonderful, but embroidery just makes my heart happy. And embroidering with silk thread. Whew. And what I like about the silk thread is the contrast next to cotton. So if you put cotton on cotton, you're not going to see the stitches as much as when you put silk on cotton. And it goes the same for quilting. When you quilt with silk, you're going to see those stitches much better than if you quilt with cotton. I mean, there's a textural contrast. And that's what you want in the quilting process, is to have a contrast of that textural, not necessarily color as much as the texture of whatever you're working on. Almost done.
Do you think it's easier to do the, what is it, the punch method? Is that what it's called?
Well, I don't know,
Than
to have it be able to spin it like in my
yeah,
lap.
because then it'd be
No,
rotating it around all the time.
It's
right?
much easier to do it in your lap. Much easier. The deal is, with me, is because of my tremors, I had to go to a hoop or I had to stop embroidering. So, I mean, because when I shake, the hoop is stable. So I don't add to that. So if you like doing it in your lap, oh my God, I'm so jealous that you could do that. You know, so there's not one better way than the other. What I have found, though, is the stab
method. Thank you.
Stab method is actually more consistent in tension.
Okay.
That, and also if you do it in your lap, the block seems to distort quite a bit. So you have to to make the block square after you're done. If you've done it in your lap, you have to actually block it. And I block it and pin it down and all that. Maybe we can do a video that shows how I do that. But if you're in a hoop, you don't have that. I mean, I always reblock it, but you don't have any of like that weird distortion that happens. Like it'll pull tight on you. Mm-hmm. And if it's pulling tight on you like that, it's not going to quilt right unless you block it. It just isn't. All right, so this is the last stitch. And when you do the last stitch, you want to aim your needle right in under. Okay, there. And I'm going to add one more stitch in the line there at the top. And see how I tucked it under? Right here. And so you want to, and that kind of finishes it, but I want to add one more stitch up here to kind of finish that out. Let me go under that. And see how it kind of stops really suddenly right there. And I'm adding a stitch right here so that it's a little bit smoother going into that circle. But there you are.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I see that now.
Okay, we're good.
Yep.
Okay, now we have just a little bit of a problem right here. So let me get the thread over to that spot, and I'll show you how to fix that little problem right there.